Welcome to Scorched Earth and a general reading for the sign of Aquarius, Sun, Moon or Ascendant for the month of November 2025. I hope you are well. I have not been, and that's why these readings are late. Apologies for that, but also thank you for your patience. It is appreciated. I'm using the Shadow and Light Tarot for you today. Before we begin, if the reading resonates with you and you would like to go a little bit deeper, there will be an extended that you can access at the end. That's via the first link in the description box below. That will take you to Selfie. Alternatively, you can come join my private community, the Order of the Phoenix, over on the Circle platform. There you can get access to all of the extended content for no extra cost beyond the membership fee. Hang out with an extraordinary group of people. See the weekly energy readings that I produce every single week for people on Circle. And they're not short. They tend to run between 40 minutes to an hour long. So, you know, every week. Additionally, if you join at the higher tier, you can come participate in the live classes that we run over there. So if that sounds like it might be of interest to you, you know what to do with those links. Right, let's flip this around here. Got the deck. I've got another quick shuffle actually. Let's get some cards out for you. 3 cards for Aquarius, please. What does Aquarius need to know? First, 7 of Cups. Current energy for Aquarius, please. 2 of Wands. And what's coming towards Aquarius for the rest of November, please. We have got the 7, 8, the 8 of Swords. Right. The 9 of Cups is at the bottom of the deck. And do you know what's really interesting? Before I do any reading at all, I spend a bit of time connecting with the energy of the person or the collective that I'm reading for. And sometimes I see things. Sometimes, words or phrases are dropped into my head. And for you, it was the rupture that leads to the rapture, which seemed a little bit dramatic. But, you know, my Leo is in Mercury. My Mercury is in Leo, so that's not really much of a surprise, right? I've got a bit of a tendency to go that way. But even just looking at the astrology, like on the eve of the week that I am recording this here for you, I understand that we are somewhat through the month now, but I do think all the big stuff is really happening from this point onwards. And to that end, right, not only do you have Pluto sitting in your sign now, but we've got a pile up of stuff coming into Scorpio. That's the Sun, the new moon, Mercury retrograding back into Scorpio. Venus is there, Lilith is there, right? We've got all of that happening over there. And then on the other side, Uranus has just come back into Taurus. Now, you know, depending on whether you're an Aquarius ascendant or an Aquarius sun, and you could be like a 9th house Aquarius sun, I don't know, you have to look to your own charts. What we do know is that within the fixed signs, and certainly at a point that squares whatever you have in Aquarius, there is a grinding here that is leading to some sort of movement, that's some sort of breakthrough. And with everything, almost everything being in water, there's an emotional intensity to it that feels like it is rupturing things that have been static, things that have been fixed, so that we can move beyond them. Now, with this 9 of Cups being at the bottom of the deck here, I do feel like a lot of what you're going through over the course of this month is about trying to find a way to align with what actually really lights you up, right? When we talk about the 9 of Cups, we're not only talking about emotional regulation, which is, you know, somewhat fallen out of favour, and I would really like to see that be hip again, right? So there's point number 1. But point number 2, right, our orientation, because it is both the state of being and also our orientation towards and the way that we move there, in terms of our highest goals, hopes, dreams and aspirations, right? Now, it shares, for me, a similarity with the Star card, which is your card. I mean, they differ in other ways, but this highest goals, hopes, dreams and aspirations, that's very much Star card energy too. But if that is the star that twinkles in the sky that says, follow me, then the 9 of Cups becomes the, how do we walk that path? Because as we know, it's never about the destination, it's about the journey that, you know, we take to get there. But there seems to be a lot of things that are jiggling around for you, right? Trying to find a way to rupture that which is rigid, to allow this more fluid state of everything that we understand about the Nine of Cups to be our guiding principle, if you will. So, let me get some clarifiers out here. Tell me about the Seven of Cups, please. Right, Five of Swords. Interesting. That's an Aquarius card right there. And we have the Eight of Wands. Super. Tell me about this Two of Wands, please. Okay. Well, that could not have been more fucking straightforward if we'd asked it to be. We have the Devil, we have the Eight of Cups, and we have the Fool card. Tell me about this Eight of Swords, please. Thank you. We have the Four of Pentacles, and we have the Knight of Pentacles. We have the Tower at the bottom of the deck. So maybe my rupture that leads to rapture isn't so far from the fucking mark, because we could totally see the Nine of Cups as a rapturous moment, right? Something that is blissful because it's aligned and it's true and it's authentic, and it's a sense of everything being regulated and moving in a direction that is purposeful and fulfilling. But the Tower is definitely the rupture right there. Now, there's always a question when the Tower shows up. And actually, let me just, for those of you who don't quite see how this becomes, how this image represents the Tower. Like when I first got this deck, I stared at it for a minute and I was like, what the fuck? And then I realised it was all in the cat. Now, that is the proper orientation of this scene right here, right? And we can only see that because of, by way of, reference to an external thing, which is the cat. But when the Tower hits, it really does feel like the world has just turned 90 degrees underneath you and you don't know where you are anymore. You're like literally sliding off the floor. I love that fucking card for that. And what do we have underneath there? We have the Ace of Swords. We have a new, extremely creative way of interpreting the signals that are coming into our mind at any given point. I mean, what we can see here is that there's definitely an upgrade in cognition going on. And for you, Aquarius, I would imagine that is an important thing. Right, the exchange of ideas, the mental expansion that everything to do with Aquarius is being very important. But at the same time, I do think that there is often a kind of glossing over exactly how much your underlying emotions contribute to your willingness or your ability to be able to integrate these new ideas and these new level of consciousnesses into yourself, because you are air, you're fixed air, but just like everybody else, you have houses in your chart that are ruled by water, and you do have an emotional side, right? It's rather sloppy stereotyping to say that Aquarians don't, or that they're always detached and always aloof. I mean, like, we've spent years talking together, Aquarius, and we've kind of delved into the reasons why that natural separation, well, it was kind of like a natural disposition, but then out of necessity it became something that you promulgated, right? And that necessity being in environments that were not particularly emotionally nurturing, right? So where is the value in being an emotional creature in those kinds of environments? There isn't really one, right? We've talked about this at length over the years. We don't need to haul ass over that again. But at the same time, there needs to be an understanding that there is an emotional undercurrent, and that one way or the other is influencing the quality of your cognition, the kind of decisions that you make, and the kind of life choices that you make for yourself too, right? And I do feel like certainly what's been going on over the entirety of November, but really is amping up a notch soon, well, let's say for the second half of November, is the purity of the water that's flowing underneath, right? We are dislodging those things that have been static, emotionally speaking, to let the water flow, to change the quality of what's going on above, right? So in your recent past here, we've got the Seven of Cups, and you know, you could see this card as a representation of emotional overwhelm. Like that wouldn't be too far out there to say. It was certainly a feeling of kind of drowning in one's emotions. I mean, in the weekly energy readings, we've been kind of referencing this quite a bit. And you can't have, you know, the majority of our planets in water without feeling the waters begin to rise. You know, Saturn is in Pisces, retrograde. Neptune is in Pisces, retrograde. The North Node is in Pisces, almost always retrograde. Jupiter is Cancer, retrograde. And in Scorpio, we're about to have Mercury retrograde back into Scorpio. The Sun is in Scorpio, the Moon is in Scorpio, the new Moon will be in Scorpio. Venus is in Scorpio, Lilith is in Scorpio. All of these planets are talking to each other. There is a dialogue going on, and some of them are retrograding and some of them are moving forwards. And that sense that we're kind of going over old emotional ground, but there is something... it's like the tap that we've always used to turn off the flow of water has suddenly developed a fault, and the room is starting to fill. That's what it feels like. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this was inconvenient at the beginning of the month, but now the water is up near my thighs and it's about to start hitting my waist. Like, where does this stop? Where does this end? And essentially we're looking for the thing that's causing the... What are we looking for, Aquarius? I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. It's like we're looking for the source of the water rather than relying on a tap which has been artificially constructed. It's like going to the source and understanding the natural flow of the water, and the fact that the water must flow all the time. Like, it can't be stemmed, it can't be dammed up, or it shouldn't be dammed up, because it'll find its expression out somewhere else. And I think that because the Five of Swords is here, there is an implication that the outlet has actually been, you know, the venting system has happened through the cognition for you, but it either can't continue like that, Five of Swords, or it has to find a new way to flow, because there seems to have been all this water pressure behind the way that you think that's now, out of a case of necessity, needing to find a new way to express itself, a new outlet, a new course perhaps to follow. And I think that we'll find that at the point where that emotional pressure recedes, we can start to see how the emotional pressure has caused a particular kind of thinking that actually we don't really feel aligned with anymore, right? So, like I said, this is an Aquarius card. It is, I think, off the top of my head, Venus and Aquarius as well. And we've got all of this square energy from both Taurus, with Uranus being there, and everything that's happening in Scorpio, which to some extent is also being charged up by everything that's happening in the other watery houses for you, right? So the feeling of intensity is completely overwhelming. But there is a message in that. And I think the message is the realization that the limits of our thinking have been reached with this level of water pressure sitting behind it. And if we can let the water out in a different kind of way, we don't run the risk of drowning in it. And I think we've all felt a little bit at points like we're drowning. And certainly there's that overwhelming feeling, right? Now, the point at which the Tower steps in, I'm not sure. I feel like the peril that we feel between the Five of Swords and the Seven of Cups and the Tower can actually represent that point where the pressure has built so much that now something has to give. There has to be a rip, there has to be a rupture, there has to be somewhere for this water to flow. But this doesn't have to be a disaster. In fact, rarely is, because, you know, if you've watched my videos for any length of time, or you've come and hung out with me in circle and attended classes that I've taught on these things, like, I really do not see the tower as a bad energy at all, because the tower will not take away what is real. What the tower will take away are false supports, you know, the little false walls that you build for yourself everywhere. I mean, the tower is about the revelation of those things that are real. It's putting you a little closer to that. So if the emotional pressure is too much, and the tower's coming in to allow a release, a rupture, we could grieve about what's falling down, or we could see this for the blessing that it is. And I do think there is something kind of blessed about it. The Eight of Wands is, it's an increase in pressure right there, right? It's an amplification, an acceleration, an increase in motivation. Momentum. There we go. That's the word that I'm looking for. All centered around the emotional right there. Now, this is Cancer. It's one of the water signs. Jupiter is currently retrograde in Cancer. And I feel like whatever this rupture is, right, if the Hierophant represents that which is rigid and unmoving and inflexible, and that's where its good points are, right, because then it's at least dependable and reliable. At the same time, the tower's kicking down those things. We've got to reimagine, rework with, you know, relearn almost, I guess, how to do these things differently. Because with so many planets in retrograde, Saturn, Neptune, Cancer, fucking Jupiter, Mercury, is there anything else? Oh, yeah, Uranus, right? The re-engaging, reassessing, reevaluating, this is all part of the energies of the moment, right? So by necessity, something very fixed is going to have to rupture to allow for a new course to be charted for the water and create the space around your thinking so that you can see things differently, right? Or you can think about things differently. It's a consciousness shift, is what's going on. But it's a consciousness shift that seems to be coming from a place that you didn't expect it. Now when we come into your current energy, we've got the Two of Wands. And there was another sign that had this, and I forget who it was. But it was almost like a really straightforward, should I stay or should I go, right? I actually heard the clash playing in my head when I saw the cards. Not this time for you, but what's really interesting about this, right, is for an incredibly cerebral sign as you are, you think about things in lots of different ways, but you're always using that tool to think about things, right? And then sometimes if the problem is in the way that you're thinking, and we can see this spread across these two cards here, you're likely never going to get to the root of the problem while you're trying to use that organ. Now, this emotional pressure, this emotional flow, it's busting through something to say, actually, you have a different element that you can lean into sometimes to understand what is happening to you. Now, the devil represents feeling stuck, feeling trapped. So does the Ace of Swords, right? But the liberation comes in the Eight of Cups when we realize that the reasons that we feel stuck and trapped are not because of the situation. It's because of our emotional relationship to it. And our emotional relationship is something that sits well beneath the level of our cognition. At least in your case, Aquarius, right? So the question then becomes, well, how do you liberate yourself? Because you are at a crossroads and there is a decision to be made one way or the other. And it's, do you stick with what you know and what is familiar? Remember that we also saw the Hierophant there, and that would probably be a good card to stick in there with that. Or do we allow what has served its purpose to fall, to allow something new to be created in its stead, right? Because I feel like the space around your brain is something that needs cultivating because it just feels kind of difficult up there at the moment, right? But also there's an alignment with something that's really fucking deep here. Now, if you and it's deep in you, Aquarius, this is the point, right? So remember what I said about this Nine of Cups over here, but notice that we've got this very subtle path that we're walking where we go from the Seven of Cups via the Eight of Cups to the Nine of Cups. It's like you can't think your way out of this situation. There's almost a need to surrender to the energies of the moment rather than trying to think your way through it, because what is fixed and rigid about your thinking, and this isn't necessarily on the level of the ideas that you can bat around and stuff, but quite clearly the function of your thinking is kind of topping out where it is, because the emotional pressure that's coming from behind is making sure that there is no space around that for you, which means that your emotions are pushing every thought that you have. They're pushing the way that you think about situations, the way that you problem solve, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for you to find a way to think yourself out of where you are. Now, do you stick with what is familiar and fight for that amidst increasing pressure, both cognitively and emotionally? Or do you recognize that there's a release valve that is being activated here? There is something being ruptured here that allows for a reduction of pressure, which by extension allows for a change in the way that you think. Because the Fool is all about liberation, right? It's about liberation, it's about freedom. I think it's for that reason that some readers associate it with the energy of the planet Uranus. I don't like that. I feel like it was shoehorned in at a later date, long before the tarot existed. And I don't, long after the tarot was established, rather. And I don't believe in just kind of matching shit up for the sake of it, right? So that aside, even though they have similar sorts of meanings, for me, just to explain a little bit more, Uranus, which is your ruling planet, right? At least in modern astrology, it was Saturn. Well, that's represented by the devil there, perhaps, in ancient astrology. Uranus has an on-off quality, right? It is unsustainable. It is erratic. It comes and you don't expect it, and it leaves again. That, for me, is the energy of the Tower, right there. It's not the energy of the Fool. Now, regardless of the fact that it's coming to liberate you and whatnot, I mean, we can say the same about the Tower anyway, right? So let's not shoehorn. Anywho, the way that the Fool works is it is a constantly accessible state. It's not a good idea for us to stay there all the time, but it doesn't have that on-off quality, right? It's always there. You can reach out and touch the Fool anytime you want. You can embody the energy of the Fool anytime you want. But there are points where it becomes more obvious to us that the Fool is present, and the energy that the Fool represents is present, and we can avail ourselves of it. Now, what you don't have cards here of is massive endings. But we do see that the cards are pushing towards the later numbers of the cycle, and so it is implied somewhere that there is change up ahead. There will be endings to navigate up ahead. There will be, changes that will be wrought. But we do have that potential energy sitting here in the Fool. And we do have a pulling away of the things that are not real by the Tower. Now, you can think about the Tower in terms of endings, but by the time the Tower shows up, whatever it's kicking over ended a long time ago. Right? I genuinely believe that the Tower comes in as a last resort. And the last resort implies by its very definition that there have been multiple opportunities presented in many periods before this one to change course. And this energy of last resort, which I find to be the expression of a loving and benevolent God, to be honest, allows you to change course violently, yes, with great upheaval, yes, in a way that feels more like a rupture than a rapture, yes, but ultimately it aligns us on a path that is more authentic and more true. The only thing that's different here is that the tension, emotionally speaking, is being pushed to such an extent now that even you can see, even you can feel that something needs to shift. Four of Swords. It's time to find a way. That's the death card down there. Well, of course it is. You know, it's all about making space. I know I keep bashing on about this, Aquarius, but it's making space for your mind. Like, your emotions aren't supposed to be dammed up. They're not supposed to be, you know, all kind of like stored in some sort of cistern low down there for you, right? They're supposed to just flow like a river alongside where you walk, where you think. You are not your emotions, but you can be the explosion of your emotions if you don't give them an outlet. And this Four of Swords feels to me more a little bit more like trying to force yourself to be peaceful about things. When you don't feel peaceful. So the Death card is here, and the Fool card is here, and the Tower card is here to instigate that rupture. Because you feel separated from what truly would fulfill you, or even at least an understanding of what would fulfill you. And maybe it's because a lot of your, emotions, repressed or not, contain ideas of what it is that you don't want to experience again, what you don't want to feel again. I feel like your emotions have been crushing the space needed for you to operate well cognitively. And the more you try and think your way out of this, the more it seems to be creating problems. Because the issue is not about your mind at this point, right? It's about releasing the pressure around it. Now that Four of Pentacles represents again this kind of doubling down on a state of being, doubling down on the dominance of your mind as the organ through which you work everything out. Doubling down almost on the kind of stuckness of the moment because of a fixed and rigid approach to what it is that is important. And the fact that the Devil is here says there's some fear down here somewhere. Now, I can't quite put my finger on what the fear is. It could be something that's sitting in your shadow that says, right, like I did right at the beginning of the reading when we were talking about, what is the benefit of being an emotional being in an environment that does not support that? None, right? So we push anything that's even remotely emotional into the shadow. We don't reference it. We don't associate it with it. We don't identify with it. We don't make any part of it the face that we show to the world. And maybe what's sitting behind all of this is a fear that if you were to let even just a little bit of the emotion out, it would become like a raging torrent, a raging flood, and control could not be brought back to that situation. But the problem is not the water. The problem actually isn't even the amount of water. It's the way that it's been backed up. It's you trying to store it in in things that weren't constructed to hold this much emotion. The Eight of Cups represents a leaving behind of a state of being that requires you to hide all of that. There's something really, really solid around integration here, Aquarius. And it's being forced. That's the thing, right? It's a rupture. But what's flowing from that is the potential for enormous transformation. The Eight of Swords is Jupiter and Gemini, and that should feel like a really expansive energy. So why do we have someone who is trapped? Well, we've got the Gemini energy that is always looking for new answers for things, right? The integration of many perspectives. Gemini wants to gather up as much as possible. And Jupiter is that expansive energy, which is, just expands everything that it touches. But while you're looking for airy answers to emotional problems, you're simply creating sword after sword after sword and encircling yourself with them. Because Jupiter in Gemini is almost like expanding what is naturally contracting. I've described the suit of swords before in classes that I've run over a circle as like the whole suit of swords as a push towards cognitive crisis, over and over and over again. And we can see the building blocks of it here, Eight of Swords. Now, the cognitive crisis for you is based in the fact that you've got this enormous, the pressure of all of this water backing up so hard that you don't even know what would feel meaningful and fulfilling to you, and you can't pursue it because you're still trying to think about it. You're trying to think about yourself as a purely airy being who is not encumbered with, all this messy emotional stuff at the same time as all this messy emotional stuff is building up in the background. To me, it seems obvious that the levee would break, that the dam walls would fail, that the cistern or the storage that you've been putting all that water in would eventually rupture so that the water can run free. And I think it has to, Aquarius, because I just don't think that you can access anything remotely like what is going to take you towards your Nine of Cups. It might be worth just pointing out that, ignoring your emotions is not the same as regulating them. It's not the same as mastering them. Sideways point, but, one that's worth remembering. There's a long, slow process here of learning to navigate between these elements for you, Aquarius. And it's not comfortable, but it's even here in the Nine of Pentacles, right? These are resources as much as your mind, as much as your airiness. And it feels like part of the missing piece of the puzzle for you. So when the rupture happens, don't fight it. Don't worry about it. Know that it is reducing pressure such that not too long from now, certainly by the end of the month, I would be expecting all of these things to have found a level. And it will change the way that you think about yourself, about the world, about reality, maybe about the people around you, possibly in the way that you interact with them. There's something that really meaningful about the transformation and the shift that is happening here for you, Aquarius. And so I think, you can keep fighting it to a point, if that's what you want to do. But there is so much pressure squaring you, building up in the background. It's going to rupture. And maybe if you resist it, it'll happen faster. I don't know. But there is a lot that's changing for you this month, and I do not think that you will be able to see things the same way once this rupture's happened. But neither do I think that you would want to, which is an interesting point. So I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to go over to the extended now. If you'd like to join me over there, you're very welcome to do so. You can do that on Selfie, you can do that on Circle. The links for both are in the description box below. If that's not your thing, that's absolutely fine. Just know that nobody's really getting through November without finding it difficult somewhere. And so, you know, whatever happens, I would just go with the flow as far as humanly possible. Because the flow is the thing that's been missing here, and that's the thing that needs to be given an opportunity to do. So, you know, anyway, know that I love you all very, very much, and I'll see you soon.